Hi, I'm Teresa Davidson. I'm the CEO of Chains Interrupted, which is a nonprofit in Eastern Iowa that contends for the freedom of youth from exploitation and human trafficking. And today's presentation is about human trafficking and some important information for you to know, especially as parents and people that have children in your lives. So I'm going to go ahead and get started and share my screen here. And make sure that we're sharing computer sound, because I do have some videos in this presentation. So basically, I want to start by explaining that the upper right-hand photo in the slide, and how many of you have seen the movie Taken, right? Where there's a young girl who's kidnapped, taken by force, locked away, and isn't that how we often think about human trafficking? Is that they're obviously would escape if they could, know they're being victimized, are in a physical force type of situation. But I'm here to tell you that if we consider that the only definition of human trafficking, because it does happen that way sometimes, but if we don't consider the psychological chains, which is the photo on the bottom right corner of your screen, then we're going to miss about 98%, because it happens a lot differently than a lot of us think. So we've got to get that kind of Hollywood mentality out of our minds. So what exactly are we talking about when we say human trafficking? Because a lot of times it's confused with smuggling, which is actually the movement of somebody across a border illegally. And human trafficking is different than that. And it's also confused a lot with prostitution, which has an element of choice to it. And human trafficking, there is no choice. So let's get to the definition. It's basically defined as the act of recruiting, harboring, transporting, providing, obtaining a person by means of force, fraud, or coercion. And force, fraud, and coercion are the main points here of the slide. And we're going to unpack those here in a minute a lot more thoroughly. For the purpose of exploitation, debt, bondage, slavery, basically labor or sex trafficking. So human trafficking is basically making somebody do something that they don't want to do by force, fraud, or coercion for the purpose of labor or sex acts. Now, I'm also an international missionary. I've gone many places across the world. And in fact, that's the first place that I saw human trafficking happening. And overseas, I see a lot of other kinds of trafficking. There's child soldiers, child brides, infant trafficking, organ trafficking. And while we do have some of that in the United States, in fact, in Chicago, just a few years ago, there was a case of infant trafficking, where the poor mother was actually murdered and her baby was cut out of her to steal. We do have that kind of trafficking, but the majority of trafficking in the United States is for labor services or commercial sex acts. And this presentation will be tailored to that, as well as our organization mainly fights sex trafficking. So that will be the primary focus of this presentation. So let's unpack those definitions a little bit better. And a lot of these words intersect and overlap with each other, but for my own simplicity, I like to think of force as physical force, that kidnapping, somebody pulls a knife, somebody pulls a gun, drugging them into submission, just that physical force that we often think of human trafficking, but isn't nearly as common as the other methods. So one other method is fraud, which is lying, manipulating, tricking someone. We see this most often through a fake relationship, either a romantic partner, somebody's pretending to be a great friend, somebody will pretend to or try to step into the role of a family member. We see this quite a bit with someone saying, oh, I'll be the mother that you never had, or the father figure that you always longed for, or that cool uncle, or hey, we're cousins, this is okay, among family members. And a lot of times traffickers are trying to exploit a vulnerability. And one vulnerability that they exploit a lot is if people don't feel like they have a family support system. So then they become that family support system. And they actually use the language of family, the daddy, wifey, sister, all of these different language words, in describing the human trafficking ring, a lot of times in a human trafficking situation, the people that are being exploited are often called the stable. And in the stable, they have family terms. And of course, with labor trafficking, that lying, tricking, manipulating, you're going to see with employment. So say somebody thinks they're going to get a nanny job and they answer an ad and they go and they actually start living there. Either the employment wasn't what they said as far as the job at all, and they're trapped in a job that they can't get out of, that they're having to do things that they don't want to do, that wasn't described in the ad, or they're working long hours, unusual work conditions, not being paid well, etc. And then coercion is the most difficult word to understand in this. And it's a lot of psychological persuasion, a lot of threats, intimidation, guilt, shame, even loyalty. So for example, I work with a lot of survivors, and every one of them has told me that they themselves were threatened. If you don't do this, we're going to beat you up. If you don't do this, maybe they're threatening somebody that they love or care about. If you run away, we'll replace you with your 10-year-old sister. If you do not do this, then we're going to hurt your mom. Just threats and intimidation. And then guilt and shame. Sometimes people get themselves in situations that turn into a human trafficking situation, and they feel really guilty about that, or there's a lot of shame in what they had to do. And then loyalty. This is such a sad statistic, but Polaris, which runs the National Human Trafficking Hotline, they have reported 2022 statistics with over 44% of survivors that were able to speak into this with them, stating that they were sold by a family member. So if you can imagine being sold by your mom or your dad or your grandparents or your cousin, a family member, you're going to feel somewhat loyal to that family member and not want them to be in trouble. And also maybe you're told that this is your role in the family, that you need to do this to be a part of that family. Some examples: labor trafficking. We see a lot in this with domestic work, like I mentioned, nanny, also cleaning services and maids. The agriculture, especially in Iowa, we see a lot of labor trafficking with that. Maybe you heard of the Marshalltown bust a few years ago, where they had children and adults from other countries working in the agricultural industry in Marshalltown, and they were arrested, and that ring was broken up, but it still continues. In fact, I'm working with an open case right now, so I can't discuss it, but with children brought in from other countries to work in agriculture in Iowa. Our factories, restaurants, hospitality, construction. In fact, 2 weeks ago in Cedar Rapids, there was a 12 or 13-year-old boy that was discovered working in a construction company here in town, and wasn't being paid, and all the things that go along with labor trafficking. Sex trafficking, it's really important for you to know that it's not always intercourse or full-blown prostitution. It can be escort services, stripping, making pornographic videos, or even just photos. That all involves sex trafficking. So what is the law if a person victimizes under 18? Because each state has their own laws of age of consent. And in Iowa, the age of consent is 16. So there are laws that say if you're 16 years old, you can consent to sex unless there's certain restrictions, right? So if the person is in a power position over you, like a boss or a teacher, if the person is 4 years older or more than that 16-year-old, then they are not legally able to consent. But if there's a commercial sexual exchange, meaning something is exchanged for something of value, like a commercial sex act is exchanged for something of value, then the age of consent goes out the window, and it's automatically considered human trafficking. So kind of to recap that, we all know that a sex act with a minor is abuse, right? But a sex act with a minor plus payment, and that payment doesn't have to be money. It can be of anything of value: food, clothing, shelter, drugs, affection, anything of value. That automatically constitutes human trafficking by federal and Iowa law. And that's a mandatory child abuse report for any of you who are mandatory child abuse reporters. And for those of you who aren't mandatory, you should still report just for ethical concerns. So if there is any commercial sex exchange is a human trafficking case for someone under 18, then there is no such thing as a child prostitute. Our government has determined that children, so those that are under 18 years of age, are not developmentally capable of making the choice to sell any kind of sex act.
Slavery. A system under which people are treated as property, to be bought, sold, forced to work. Millions. That's the number of slaves today. Billions. More money than you can comprehend. That's what's being made off of slaves each year worldwide. What if the land of the free is the home of the slave? For hundreds of thousands of people living here on American soil, on American streets, in American neighborhoods, this is a reality. We've been taught that slavery ended in 1865, but today it has a different name: human trafficking. People from other countries are being brought here to be exploited. And yet, the majority of traffic victims in our country are Americans, many of whom are being exploited for sex. I need you to understand, the average age of these victims is 13 years old. These are our friends. They're your classmates. It's affecting so many people and so many lives. What do we do about it? How do we help this? How do we fix it? You gotta know what's going on. You gotta see what's happening around you. You can choose to fight back. It stops with you. It stops with us. It stops with me.
So there will be a couple videos during this presentation. Sorry, I didn't warn you about that one before it just automatically started, but let's talk about how it happens. How does human trafficking happen? So this is the grooming process that I'll explain. And the first thing that traffickers will do is target someone. Now, every one of us that are in this presentation in any way fit the profile of a victim. We all fit the profile of a buyer, and we all fit the profile of a trafficker. There really isn't a stereotypical look or gender or socioeconomic status or race or anything at all. There's nothing stereotypical about this. Traffickers can be anyone, buyers can be anyone, victims can be anybody, but traffickers do target people with certain vulnerabilities more than others. And that is people that have emotional neediness, or maybe that have low self-esteem, an economic need, those that run away or are without a home. A history of a sexual abuse or sexual assault is the #1 vulnerability that traffickers target. And interestingly enough, there's been a couple studies that show that roughly 84% of survivors will say that they had experienced sexual abuse or sexual assault in the past. But interestingly enough, 84% of traffickers will also say that they had experienced sexual abuse or sexual assault in the past. And they are, in this role now because of it. So sexual abuse, sexual assault is a very big root cause of human trafficking, and one that we fight against at Chains Interrupted as well. They'll target people with difficult family lives, especially, we talked about the traffickers will pretend to be the family. And so if somebody feels like they don't have that family support, they'll step in and be that support person. Somebody that feels like they don't fit in. And here's the most terrifying part of the targeting, the grooming process, is that they target those that are young. And that's so many. Wanting love, affection, affirmation, and quite frankly, who doesn't? Somebody looking for an adventure. And think about our teenagers, they're all looking for an adventure, and so are we. I mean, it's just very prevalent. And those that care about someone or something, and that's why we're all vulnerable to this, because we all care about someone or something, and it makes us vulnerable. And of course, online, oh my goodness, human trafficking has skyrocketed since the pandemic because it forced all of our kids to go online. It forced all of the predators to go online as well. And online grooming is now the #1 method that traffickers use to target and groom our kids and adults. So what they do is they try to gain that person's trust. So they'll target them and then they try to form a relationship, either by being a friend, a parent figure, a romantic partner, all of these things. And they're wanting to gain their trust so that they can gain information about them. And what the main information they're looking for is, what is it that you need? Because the trafficker wants to fill that need. They want to become the savior. They want to become the only person that the victim can rely on, the only one that gets them, the only one that understands them, the only one that can provide for them. And maybe it's a romance, maybe it's housing, maybe it's drugs or alcohol, maybe it's wealth or fame or some other need, but whatever it is, they're going to try to fill that need. And once they fill that need and kind of create a dependent relationship with the person, then they try to isolate them. Maybe that means literally physically taking them somewhere else, across state lines or wherever. But most of the time it's a social isolation where they're breaking down the good relationships in the person's life, replacing them with themselves, because again, they want to be the only one. Once they have that dependent relationship created, they will start the abuse. And in one of the romantic relationship phase, we call this Romeo to gorilla, where the person is just being romanced and everything is perfect and smelling like roses, and then all of a sudden turns in, like just on a switch, turns into a gorilla type situation. And this is actually a very effective way to maintain control through that cycle of abuse. And you've probably heard about this through domestic violence, why people don't leave, because they're under the control through threats, violence, fear. And with human trafficking, we see a lot of blackmail too, especially with kids that maybe, or even adults that maybe have had a sexual video made of them, that they may not even have been aware that it was made. And then the trafficker will say, okay, I have this video, I'm going to put it online unless you do these things. And I was actually working with a young woman who wanted to take her life because she had a boyfriend and he convinced her to do a sexual act with him. She did it and he videoed it without her knowledge. And then he said, I have this video and I need you to run away from home when I call. And when I call, you're going to run away and you're going to come and you're going to service all these people with sexual acts, and they're going to pay me. I'm going to get the money, but you can't say anything and you can't do anything about it, or I'll put this video of you online. So we ended up working with her, and the story ends well, is that she was able to tell us what was going on and who was involved, and through some law enforcement assistance got her out of that situation, and she did not take her life. So that ended well, but this is what they do, maintain control.
It started when I was 12 years old. My stepdad had been laid off for about a year, and things at home were getting really bad. He had this one friend that hung out at our house all the time, and one day he told my stepdad that He could make a lot of money if he took pictures of me and put them online. That's how it started. He said if people were willing to pay, he was willing to try it. He said it was the only way that we could take care of my family, and that if I didn't do it, he would make my 10-year-old sister do it. There was no way I could let that happen. I had to protect her. I felt like I had no choice. It wasn't just pictures for very long.
Pornography is a leading contributor to sex trafficking. It breeds addiction, which can lead to purchasing sex. Many actors in pornography are victims of exploitation, and many of them are minors.
I hated my home life. My dad left before I was born, and so it's just my mom taking care of my sister and me. And I know she had it hard, but she was never really there for me. She was always drinking, and when she was drunk, she would scream at us and hit us. She blamed it all on us. She told us that we were worthless and that we ruined her life. I was so angry at everyone. So I left. I decided things would be better for me on the street. I stayed with a friend for the first couple of nights, and then another one after that. But after a couple weeks, I ended up on the street. This lady came up to me and asked me if I needed help. She seemed nice. She told me that I could stay with her and her boyfriend. I thought I would give it a try.
Millions of children in the United States run away every year. Most of them are running away from abusive situations at home. Many of them will be approached by a trafficker within the first few days of running away.
I was in and out of foster care my whole life. My dad abused me from the time I was too little to even remember, until he took me away. My mom was so high, she didn't even notice. I've been passed around from foster home to shelter to foster home to shelter for as long as I can remember. Nobody wanted to adopt a 10-year-old with a drug addict for a mom and a dad who abused her. Psh. One day, this girl came up into the shelter. She was so pretty and naive. She wore all these nice clothes and everything. So we got really tight really fast. She took care of me like a big sis. I looked up to her. I trusted her. I felt so important when she asked me to jump the fence with her to meet her boyfriend. Like I was going to be a part of something big and great.
Many victims of sex trafficking have been displaced from the home at some point in their lives. Some of them are recruited by other victims who have been manipulated into doing so.
I had a pretty normal life. My parents worked a lot. They weren't bad parents. I was a cheerleader. I'd give anything to go back to that life. My parents were putting a lot of pressure on me about college and stuff, and so we were arguing like all the time. I needed some space. My home life was dull, and so I knew I really wanted something adventurous and exciting. So I met this guy online, and I guess I kind of saw him as my break from reality for a while. He was always inviting me to stuff, and it seemed really fun. I felt like he understood me better than anyone.
The internet is a growing tool used by human traffickers and other predators to lure teens into relationships for the purpose of abuse and exploitation. It is said that 100% of victims who have been targeted online have gone willingly to meet their trafficker or predator.
So where does it happen? Pretty much everywhere, guys. The streets, bus stops, grocery stores, those are places where the kiddos go when they run away. Foster care, DHS, that's where our most vulnerable children are, and traffickers know that, and so they target those places. Libraries, a lot of our homeless are there, and librarians have reached out to me quite a bit to say that they are seeing human trafficking happen there, and people being exploited. Schools are where our kids are, and I've actually had students tell me that traffickers have come and they didn't recognize them as traffickers, but they do now, where they were actually paying students to tell them who's vulnerable, who has parents that aren't paying attention or are alone after school, or who doesn't have any friends or is bullied or maybe tried to take their life. Those kind of vulnerabilities. Parties, parks, ball games, malls. My goodness, I used to run a survivor support group for adult women, and every single one of the survivors in that support group said that they were recruited at a food court at a mall. And these are survivors that were local. And of course, online, I can't state this enough, that the most common place that traffickers are recruiting and grooming people is online. Social media, chat rooms, 89% of survivors will say that they experience this in a chat room. Sugar dating, some of you may not be aware of what that is, and I've got a video that's coming up that will explain it a lot better, but it's a very slippery slope and something that we need to warn our children about, because they are targeting, these sites are targeting our kids. And sugar dating, I've already worked with several survivors of human trafficking that were trafficked through sugar dating. Online dating websites, if I was a trafficker and I was looking for someone who was looking for a romantic relationship that I could exploit that way, I would go online to an online dating site. And that's what is happening, because it's just everybody's on there and that's what they're looking for. So you have to be really careful. There are a lot of success stories on online dating, but also you just have to be really careful. And we can't forget online gaming, because traffickers will start to play these games with the kids, and then they become, quote, friends. And remember, that relationship is how it all starts. And so sometimes the relationships aren't pure motive here. And so not only are the gaming that's on the computer, but any device that has internet capability as well. We have to remember that as parents, because boy, all these things that are dangerous, our kids never really thought about before. And sexting, I don't know if you've heard of that, but it's basically sending a sexually explicit photo or video by text. And when you do that, you lose control over where that photo ends up, and it can lead into a human trafficking situation as well. People can be anybody that they want to be online. This is one of the main things that we need to teach our kids. Meet 10-year-old Becky's 12-year-old internet friend. Does this guy look like a 12-year-old girl who loves volleyball and puppies, like he's pretending to be online to this other 12-year-old girl who loves volleyball and puppies? Absolutely not. But how come 10-year-old Becky believes that this guy is a 12-year-old girl who loves volleyball and puppies? Because she's 10 and she doesn't have that developmental capability to know that this is not who it appears to be. And also, any of us could fall victim to this, because when we are online, we don't have all of our senses engaged as we do if we meet someone in person. And even meeting somebody in person can be deceiving. So our senses are much more limited to meeting people online as well. Now, talk about sugaring. It's a dangerous trend, and it basically puts financially vulnerable people at risk of coercion from predators, which then may lead them into human trafficking. And this next video will really explain it better. Uh-oh, we're going to spin a minute here. See if we can get it to go.
Sugar dating is presented as a mutually beneficial relationship. Typically wealthy man, though sometimes it can be a woman, engages in an arrangement or a pseudo relationship with a younger, attractive female or male. And the idea is that it's an arrangement where there's an allowance or cash or payment of a loan in exchange for said companionship. And it's marketed as this idea where it's a relationship on your terms. If you're struggling financially, it's a great way to make money. All you have to do is go out to dinner or spend time with this person and they will pay you some sort of allowance. And there's no strings attached, no sex required. But what we're finding is that that's often not the case. What ends up happening is that when there is money exchanged, there's an expectation that sexual acts should be performed as part of that exchange. And that's where the dangers of sugar dating really come into play and where the question of prostitution comes in. I first got involved in the issue of sugar dating last summer when I was interning at World Without Exploitation. And then I was surprised to see that following fall that on my campus the discussion on sugar dating had become very prevalent in a very positive light. My school newspaper had published 2 articles back to back about the benefits of sugar dating. One was called Seeking Arrangement Sets Up Sweet Deals for Students, and the next one was Where Your Sugar Daddy Can Take You on Restaurants in New Orleans. I was really troubled by this because I had been made aware of the dangers that come along with sugar dating. It was surprising to see that in both articles, neither of them discussed any potential danger, and in a place where there's such a financial discrepancy and there's a lot of students who are on financial aid and in a city that has a big culture of spending, it made me really nervous to see that this was being posed as a way to make money that was consequence-free and completely safe. So I reached out to my school newspaper and I sent them a letter explaining some of the dangers of sugar dating, talking to them about how it was their responsibility as journalists to give the full story and to make sure that students are aware of these inherent dangers: harassment, sexual assault, stalking, accounts of rape, cash, and repayment of loans or fancy gifts are held over women's heads to be coerced into performing acts that they're not comfortable with, that they did not agree to. And I didn't hear back from them for a long time. So I decided to take matters into my own hands and I contacted the president of my university. I sent him both of the articles that the school had published. I sent him my letter to the editor, accompanied with some information about the harms of sugar dating. And they were very quick to respond, and I had the Office of the President working with me. Eventually, my school newspaper did respond. They apologized for taking so long to get back to me, and they said that they had not done enough research on the dangers. So that was a great victory to see that they had recognized that. But I knew from then on that there was a lot that had to be done, that the conversation needed to change, that we needed to shift the narrative. So I started working on educating my friends and people in my sorority and people in my school community about the dangers of sugar dating so that we could make sure that everyone was aware of these inherent dangers and the risks that come along with a practice like this. My name is Tamara Aronson. I'm a rising senior at Tulane University.
Wow, the world needs more of her, I think.
Sugar dating.
All right. So does it happen in Iowa? I'm going to let the next few slides just answer that question. And guys, I'm telling you that these news articles are just the tip of the iceberg, and that as anti-human trafficking coordinator at Mercy Medical Center over the last few years, I've worked with over 300 survivors in our area alone. And so it's not a question of whether it happens here. It's definitely, and not just in the cities, but in the rural areas as well.
Went from pictures to videos after about a month. That went on for a really long time. Then my stepdad started bringing men in and making me do things I was so ashamed of. He made me watch other porn too, so I would know what I was supposed to do. He made an ad for me and put it on the internet and started selling me out of a motel a few blocks from our house. I go to school every day and no one knows. But I'm afraid that someone will see one of those pictures or videos. I have nightmares about it every night because so many people around here watch porn. I want to scream it out at the top of my lungs that not all the people that you see in those videos are willing to do the things that they're doing. My stepdad films men abusing me almost every single night, and people pay money to watch it. I have no idea who I could ever tell or who I could ever go to. The only hope that I have is that when I'm 18, I can take my sister and leave forever. I'm asking you, I'm begging you to stop watching.
Sadly, some sex trafficking is happening within the home. These young people are being sold and exploited by family members or guardians. They are not lured. They are manipulated through feelings of obligation or loyalty.
After about a week, I found out that my stay wasn't going to be for free. I didn't know it, but they had put out an ad for me online. They had people coming to their house. They told me that I owed it to them, that I had to do this, because I was staying in their house and I was eating their food, and this was the only way that I could repay them. I told them no at first, and then her boyfriend beat me up so bad I couldn't even walk the next day. They're always watching me. They even have girls doing this. They all think this guy is their boyfriend. It's like they've been brainwashed. I'm gonna run. I just have to find the right time.
Some traffickers are manipulating young people by providing basic necessities such as food, clothing, and shelter. These victims are controlled through feelings of indebtedness or loyalty.
She said he would take care of me. And at first he did. He made me feel loved. Nobody ever made me feel loved before. He made me feel like somebody noticed me and somebody thought I was beautiful. He drove fancy cars and, bought me all these presents and stuff. But then he asked me to sell myself. He said I could help him make more money and that he'd be proud of me. So I did it, but I ain't never been the same after that. Nothing has ever been the same after that. After a while, he asked me to get a younger girl for him. I did it. I told her she can make lots of money and be part of a family, you know, just like homegirl did for me back at the shelter. That's the part that haunts me the most, you know. The first time she got beat, I cried for hours. Because it was my fault she was there. I knew she'd never get out. Once you're in, you never get out. Not unless you end up like me, locked up.
Friending is a common tactic used in recruitment. Preying on a young person's need for friendship and belonging can entice a victim into a situation of exploitation.
He would say things like, "Nobody understands you like I do." He was always telling me how beautiful I was. He told me that he would take care of me, and that with my cheerleading skills and dancing abilities that I could make a good living. So when he asked me to start taking pictures of myself, I did. I mean, I trusted him. And then he kept asking me to leave with him. So one day I had this huge fight with my parents, and that was it. I left. The first couple of days were great, and everything seemed perfect. But then he changed. He said that if I didn't do what he told me, then he would hurt my family. He was gonna post the pictures that I sent him all over the internet. I didn't know what else to do. Sometimes I dream about going back home, but I can't. My parents would be so ashamed of me. I can never go back.
Boyfriending or girlfriending is a common way for a trafficker to groom a victim. If the victim falls in love, then the trafficker has yet another level of control over them.
Well, after all that, I could only show you this. The fire extinguisher is on fire. Isn't that how we feel right now? It's like, well, what can we do? Well, there are things that we can do. So there is definitely hope. And that's the next part of this presentation. And the most important thing that we can do is prevent this, because once somebody has been trafficked, the effects on their life are lifelong. So we really do want to prevent this. And you can start by educating yourself, which you already are because you're at this presentation, but also the other people and especially children in your life. Educate them on the dangers of human trafficking, what to look for in their own kids, and then for your kids, how to prevent it from happening. And the most successful way to prevent this from happening with children in your life is your relationship with them. Let's call this especially the situational awareness part, where you know what's going on. You know who they're talking to online, you know who their friends are, you know where they are at all times, and that there's open communication. And obviously, you know, we all think that we have open communication with our kids, but sometimes our kids don't know what they can come to us with, especially if they've messed up. I would encourage you to make it a situation where your kids have a safety net if they mess up. Like the whole goal of child development is to be able to mess up and learn from those mistakes in a safe environment. So say one of your kids has actually made the mistake of sending a nude photo or video to someone over text. They need to be able to tell you that, because if they don't tell you that, that photo is probably going to be downloaded online and it could go viral. I'm working with several kids who actually have lawsuits against Twitter because they had a video that was shared on Twitter and downloaded. And when they tried to handle it themselves, Twitter didn't take it down. And in fact, when the parent actually said, hey, this person is 14 years old and he did not consent to this, this is child pornography, basically, they still didn't take it down. It took the parent going to a governmental agent like CIA to get it taken down. And so open communication is very important because this needs to be taken down quite quickly. Otherwise, it can just go be downloaded a lot and viral and never be able to be taken off the internet. So kind of going down a rabbit hole on that one, but open communication is super important, as is the ability to think critically when this happens. And then please trust your gut. If you think something is wrong, if you think you're seeing signs and symptoms of human trafficking in someone in your life, children or adult, whatever, trust your gut and reach out. Especially the kiddos that don't have good self-esteem, build that self-esteem and resiliency in them. Be the person that does that. Things that you can watch for in anyone, but especially kids in your life, are especially a change. Like if they've been going along and doing fine and all of a sudden there's this change, whether it's in appearance, sometimes they try to look older. Maybe they're wearing inappropriate clothing for the situation or weather. Maybe they're very scantily clad now, or they suddenly have tattoos or brandings. And certain tattoos that trafficking situations often encounter are barcodes, because what do you put a barcode on? Something that you buy. Or dollar signs. We see dollar signs behind the ear in Iowa and also on the knuckles a lot. Names of the traffickers, because it's like an ownership type thing. Brandings as well. And traffickers have gotten away from tattoos or brandings a little bit because we're onto them with this. So now I've heard that they've started to use jewelry. So if you see, a group of people, especially with the same jewelry, that should be a sign. And obviously not any of these signs alone are enough to say, hey, that's a human trafficking situation. That child's trying to look older. Of course not, because that's a developmentally appropriate thing. Most kids try to look older, but if you have other things going on in their life besides that kind of adds up to human trafficking, look deeper and add them up. Trust your gut. Watch for changes in behavior as well. And the number one behavioral change is that they may appear to be under the control of someone else. And that's trafficking. That's what they're doing, is they're controlling that person. Maybe the person suddenly has an older romantic partner or friend, especially these older partners. It doesn't make sense that they would want a younger partner. A lot of times it's not for good reason. Of course, a lot of our teenagers and even others are obsessed with being online or with their cell phone, but that is just yet another thing to watch for, to add up into this scenario, especially if they are holding secrets or seem to hide those communications. They don't want people looking at their phone, or they're lying, their stories don't add up. Increased rebellion, again, a normal teenage thing, but this can add up. If somebody's trafficked or feels like they're in a situation where they don't have any hope, that's when depression, the anxiety, the self-harming behaviors come into play. So watch for that. People often don't disclose that they're in a trafficking situation, and the number one reason is that they don't understand that they're being victimized. They think they're in a relationship, they think they're in love, but also that fear we talked about with the abuse and the threats and the intimidation and the coercion and the force and all of that. Obligation, maybe they feel like they have a debt to pay, or they're blaming themselves for getting into that situation. Dependent relationship, maybe they'll feel judged if they fear that they will feel judged if they disclose that they are experiencing this. Or maybe somebody has been asked the question, but it was in front of the person that's actually trafficking them. We need to separate them from the accompanying person. Love 146, we're going to stop this screen here, and we're going to go to this website because it's got some great resources. And I want to share this video too with you real fast.
To the untrained eye, it's almost never obvious, but trafficking is happening around you. And every child is vulnerable, even yours. Even me. Make it okay for me to have a conversation with you. Really try to hear what I'm saying. Tell me that nothing I say will make you love me less. Don't assume I already know that. And realize it might take some time for me to believe it. Learn about my relationships. Who do I have a crush on? Who am I talking to online? I want you to care. And help me tell the difference between what's fun and what's sketchy. And if I don't answer, don't take it personally, but don't give up either. Help me connect with other safe people. If you don't take interest, if I don't know you care, then I'll just be silent.
And not just silent, but possibly exploited. And just look at this website. It's got such great resources with webinars, guides, recordings, pages of information for free resources for parents and caregivers to assess or address trafficking. Well, now we're going to go back to the presentation because I've got a few more resources to share with you on this. So chainsinterrupted.com is the organization that I am with, and we've got a website that we're actually revising because we've recently changed our focus to youth, but there's still some good resources there. We also have a survivor guidance program. So this is for kids that are being groomed and they don't realize it. They think they're in love, they think they're in a romantic relationship. And we have some survivors who are willing to come talk to those kids to tell them, hey, this is what happened to me, and ask, does this sound familiar? And just kind of in a friendship type of situation instead of lecture. And then there's also all sorts of websites there that are very helpful. Stop Trafficking Project, Parents Against Child Trafficking, Love 146. Fight the New Drug is basically focuses on pornography because pornography has a huge link with human trafficking, and there are resources there to get help if someone's addicted, as well as just information about how is this harmful, because definitely the media is saying that it's not harmful. Protect Young Eyes is an amazing website that if you're concerned about tech, if you're concerned about how to protect my child on a cell phone, an iPhone, an Android, a Chromebook, a laptop, a Wii device, other gaming devices, they have an entire section where each device is listed and it will tell you the steps on how to protect your children, especially from being exposed to pornography, unwelcomed and unwanted and unasked for pornography on these devices, because it happens all the time. Enough.org, missingkids.org, those NetSmarts videos, a lot of times parents will ask me, how do I even begin the conversation with my kids about this? And what I'll say is, why don't you start with some videos or some brochures or something and share it with your child together, like watch the video together, and then have this conversation about the video. And so there's some NetSmarts videos that are really helpful with that. If a child has actually shared a nude photo or video via text, there is now a new service through the National Missing and Exploited Children site, and it's called Take It Down. And they actually help people take it offline, which is really, really a crucial service and one that's very new and very needed. We have an office to combat human trafficking here in Iowa. That's the number. There's also a national human trafficking hotline and an Iowa victim service hotline. All of them would be able to provide resources and information. And even if you suspect human trafficking, you can call them and talk it through, and then they would have resources for you as well. And if any of the survivors would rather text, they can text Be Free, BEFREE, to the National Human Trafficking Hotline. And then that's a safer way sometimes than speaking it verbally if someone's around. So main takeaways from this presentation that I really want you to remember are 5 things, okay? 1, there's no such thing as a child prostitute. 2, everyone watching this presentation fits the profile of a victim, a trafficker, and a buyer. Number 3, children in your life are being targeted online, and they also don't have the developmental capability to handle what is being thrown at them online. So we've got to add that to our talk on, stay away from cigarettes and alcohol and drugs. We need to add that online safety chat with them in that talk as well, and continue the conversation. Number 4, force, fraud, and coercion aren't always obvious. Sometimes when you so trust your gut, right? So sometimes when you see something, you need to trust your gut and look a little deeper. Always delve into this deeper and deeper. So what can your business do? Well, your business can create a policy. It can train all the team members. It can join the Iowa Business Against Trafficking through the Iowa Secretary of State's office, and check your supply chain. Who is in that supply chain, and are they cognizant of labor and sex trafficking? Do they have good practices, or is labor trafficking involved in your supply chain? It's important to know. And then give what you do, whatever it is that you do or have. Think of creative ways on how to give that to help fight human trafficking. On a personal level, I would ask that you tell 5 people what you learned today, and ask them to tell 5 people, because this is such an important topic, and a lot of people aren't aware of how common it is and how to protect their children and other people in their circle, which leads me to awareness action within your circle. So think about those traffickers who are targeting individuals and then reaching out to them to meet those needs. What would happen if we looked at the people in our lives and said, who's vulnerable, and then reached out to them to meet their needs with us, safe people versus traffickers? We would prevent trafficking from happening in the first place, which is the most important thing. And then also you could join the fight for freedom. Chains Interrupted has all kinds of ways to join the fight. We accept volunteers all the time. The next couple of slides, you may be watching this presentation after the date, but these are annual events. So Saturday, June 10th is our next annual bicycle ride. We also have other rides with motorized vehicles. So if you don't want to ride a bicycle, you can ride motorcycle, trucks, cars, anything with wheels is welcome. Saturday, June 24th. And also we need volunteers to help with these events, not only participate in them. So July 30th is World Day Against Human Trafficking in Persons. So the week prior to that, we try to raise awareness through the Red Sand Project. And the Red Sand Project actually has its own website, or you can find out about this on chainsinterrupted.com. But basically, this is a social media event. So anyone, anywhere throughout the whole nation can participate, and we can get you sand, or you can get this through the Red Sand Project, depending on your location. And basically, the whole point of this is to pour red sand in cracks of the sidewalk, and it's to raise awareness for those who fall through the cracks of human trafficking. Many, many other ways to get involved. Scan this QR code to get involved with us. We are also on Facebook and Instagram, or you can go to chainsinterrupted.com and find out all of the things to be involved. We do have a volunteer newsletter that goes out. And so if you're not sure you want to be involved, but you just want to kind of know what are the opportunities, sign up to get that, and you'll be able to find out all the things that you could possibly get involved with.
What is this villain that has taken over our homes, our cities, our countries, our world? Images of glamorous seduction, screaming loudly, getting up in our faces. A facade, a misperception, a truth hidden, lurking silently in dark corners, unseen, right before our very eyes. An injustice, an evil so appalling, thriving just beneath the surface, preying on the vulnerable, oppressing the abused, stealing the future of those who are innocent and unaware.
When will we see the truth behind the disguise of enticement? The emptiness behind the eyes of those on the other side of the screen? Or even the hollowness of a girl dancing on a pole? When will we see the emptiness of those who are walking the streets? When will we see the truth in these images?
That take captive our thoughts, that abduct our innocence. When will we look further? To see those who can't be seen, to notice those who aren't noticed, to love those who aren't loved, and to fight for those who have no one else to fight for them.
Well, now we know. Now we see. We will step out. We will step up. We will speak out, and we will speak up. We will be the voice for those whose voice has been silenced. We will not shy away from speaking about the things that are afflicting our society.
We will stand against what people say is normal and acceptable. We will speak out the truth.
We will fight for the future we know we have.
We are valuable.
We have purpose.
We are the future.
Okay, well, I'm going to leave you with a quote from one of my favorite abolitionists, William Wilberforce. You may choose to look the other way, but you can never again say that you did not know. You can contact us at info@chainsinterrupted.com, or you can go to our website at www.chainsinterrupted.com. Here's our office number, and I just want to give a big thank you to everyone who participated in this presentation and cared about this issue. I'm going to stop sharing here, and thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate it.